This is Story Recapped. Today I'm going to explain a horror thriller film called Blood River. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. While driving on an empty road, Clark and Summer listen to the radio that seems to be broadcasting an exorcism. Unamused by the program, Clark asks Summer to change the station, so she switches to an old country song. Clark groans, but Summer teases that it's either that or the exorcism station. As they continue, they find a man walking alone. Clark worries for the man given the hot weather, but Summer isn't comfortable having a stranger in their car, so they drive away. The man watches their car as they leave. Later, the couple checks in at a motel. The innkeeper, Angie, shyly laughs as she struggles to find their room key, excusing that she's new. Finally, she hands it to Clark, smiling at him, but he just walks away. As the couple leaves, Angie tells him to holler if they need anything, though her eyes still linger on Clark. In their room, Clark teases Summer about Angie liking him, and she jokingly shrugs it off. The two continue a flirty banter that ends with a kiss. At the bar, Angie flirts with Joseph, so he invites her to drink, but she declines as she's working. Still, he argues that nobody will mind. After making love, Clark strokes Summer's stomach lovingly. He wonders if their baby can hear them, but Summer laughs since she's only 2 months pregnant. Still, Clark gently kisses her stomach and says goodnight to their unborn baby. In another room, Joseph softly preaches closely to Angie's ear, telling her that everyone has a choice, but every sin comes with punishment. As Angie cries, he passes his judgment on her life, claiming to be God's messenger. The next day, the couple gets ready to leave, but Angie isn't in the lobby, so Clark leaves their key and payment at her desk. As they drive away, Joseph watches them from his room. He then washes his bloodied hands in the bathroom, where Angie sits in the bathtub, her wrist slit and her forehead carved with a cross. She cries, so he tells her to trust God as everything happens for a reason. As she cuts herself again, Joseph assures her that it's okay. Finally, Angie bleeds out, and Joseph says amen and sticks her picture on the door with her face crossed out. While driving, Clark shares that he's happy about their trip despite his trepidation at meeting Summer's parents. Summer assures him that her parents will be happy to learn that they'll have a new grandkid, but Clark acts out her father's lectures about responsibility. Summer suggests that her father is shaping him up in his image, and Clark smiles at the scary thought. Suddenly, their tire pops, causing them to crash. Clark wakes up covered in blood while Summer breathes and panicked gasps next to him. He pulls himself out of the car and helps her out. She's panicking for their baby, so he tries to calm her down. When she sees his bloodied arm, Summer hurries to patch him up. Afterward, Clark tries to start the car, but it's stuck with a blown-up tire, and their spare tire is missing. Summer berates him for not packing one, but he insists that he did. Enraged, he kicks the car. Seeing Summer distressed, Clark apologizes for his outburst. Hoping to get her to a doctor, he checks a map and sees a town 5 miles away. Summer wants to stay in case help comes by, but he argues that any car would pass the same road and see them anyway. Summer asks what the town is called, and both find it ironic that it's called Blood River. The couple starts walking, but the scorching heat is relentless, and they run out of water along the way. Soon, Summer gets tired and sits on the road, but Clark encourages her to keep going. After hours of walking, they arrive at Blood River, only to find that the town is abandoned. Clark focuses on finding water, but Summer gets emotional and hopeless. He comforts his pregnant wife, urging her that they can find something to save them. Eventually, they sit down to rest. Summer worries about their baby, so he encourages her that they'll figure things out. Clark then decides to search for something useful, leaving Summer with a kiss. While searching, Clark finds a trailer with a sink, but the faucet turns up empty. Frustrated, he lets out his anger away from his wife's eyes. He talks himself down, but when he sees the pantry empty as well, he kicks the cabinets in anger. Meanwhile, Summer hears a buzzing noise, only to discover it coming from a rotting coyote's corpse. Disgusted at the worm-infested body, she turns away and calls for Clark. While she searches for him, Clark ignores her calls, hoping to calm himself down first. She walks further and finds Joseph walking into town. Thinking he can help, Summer calls for Clark again, and the couple greets Joseph. They inform him about the car crash, and Joseph calls Clark bold for crossing the desert without a spare tire. Joseph then asks if Summer's baby is okay, to which she says yes, thinking nothing of it. He shares that he ran out of gas and walked to the town, hoping for help, only to get disappointed like the couple. Joseph invites him to take shelter from the heat, so Summer follows him, leaving Clark to carry Joseph's bags reluctantly. Inside the house, Joseph asks to touch Summer's stomach, and she hesitantly agrees. He rubs his hand and breathes on his palm before touching Summer's stomach. To her surprise, Summer feels something inside. This assures her that her baby is okay, but Clark isn't convinced by Joseph's antics. Clark suggests staying there until help passes by, but Joseph advises them against this since it'll take a while before help comes. Instead, he suggests staying the night and siphoning gas from Clark's car to fuel Joseph's truck in the morning. Thinking it's a good idea, the couple agrees. As Clark gathers firewood with Joseph, he asks him about their situation. When Joseph knows that their chances of rescue aren't great, Clark asks to keep this secret from Summer so she doesn't worry. When he explains himself, Joseph tells him he doesn't need to because Clark will only have to answer to God. Clark laughs, confused, before Joseph tells him it's a joke. He then also warns him not to touch his wife and suggests being friendly in a different way. Joseph agrees with a smile. Upon returning to their makeshift camp, Joseph immediately tells Summer about their conversation, claiming that they all need to be aware of the truth. She confronts Clark, and he defends that he doesn't want her to worry. Still, she demands to be told everything, so Clark agrees, defeated. While sharing his canned goods for dinner, Joseph asks if this is her first child. Summer answers that she has a 5-year-old son, Ben, who she had before Clark. Summer shows him her son's picture while Joseph comments about kids losing their spirit at school, where they learn to work for the man. Clark asks if he has problems with authorities, so Joseph declares that he only sees himself and God as authority figures. He adds that people are too distracted by math and geography to think for themselves or the world collapses around them. As the couple prepares to sleep, Summer asks where he lives. Joseph knows that he lives in his mind's eye, adding that a man can be a king of his own mind. He explains that people don't see him when they should, so they get burned first when he rises. Summer likens him to a revolutionary, but he says that a revolution is a cycle, and his actions have a definite start and end. When Joseph leaves to relieve himself, Clark asks Summer's opinion of Joseph. She answers that he's nice, although kooky. Clark doubts this, so Summer describes Joseph as a hippie who always promotes peace. In the morning, Summer rummages through her purse, searching for Ben's photo. Clark tries to assure her that they'll find it, but she asks Joseph when they're leaving instead. Clark wants her to stay to let her rest, and Joseph agrees. However, Summer doesn't feel safe alone. For her protection, Joseph gives Summer his revolver. She's wary of it, but he encourages her to defend herself. When Clark agrees, Joseph starts teaching her how to use it, and Clark turns away, angered to see his wife so close to another man. He intently strokes her arm and whispers in Summer's ear. Joseph moves Summer's arm until the gun points to Clark. He stares at his eyes, raising the tension in the air. Clark curtly tells Joseph not to point a gun at him, but Joseph continues his stare, then shouts, "Bang!" The couple jumps and Summer laughs, not noticing the tension between the men. After the lesson, Clark checks on his wife, making sure she's fine by herself, but she's now confident about protecting herself. Relieved, Clark leaves. Along the road, Clark confronts Joseph about aiming the gun at him, arguing that they're already in a tough situation, so Joseph shouldn't pull anything weird. Joseph advises him to focus on the job instead of how hard it is. Instead of taking Joseph's advice, Clark starts complaining about the heat. Joseph mocks him, saying everything is a state of mind, but Clark asks if that includes death. Joseph answers that death comes for all, so there's no point in crying about it. Clark scoffs, comparing him to fortune cookies, while Joseph counters that he needs to loosen up. When Clark argues that he doesn't know him, Joseph starts describing Clark as someone who's never known real hardship. He rants how men like him are so high up that they can't see the pain in this world. Clark doesn't argue further, believing that hippies like Joseph are set in their ways. Joseph disagrees with Clark's description because he believes he's powerful. In town, Summer wakes to hear preaching. She looks around warily with a gun in hand. When Clark stops, exhausted, Joseph asks about him and Summer. He's suspicious, but tells him they've been together for 2 years. Joseph comments that he doesn't know how lucky he is. Clark tells him off for thinking he knows him, but Joseph firmly believes he knows his soul. Laughing in disbelief, Clark tells him to stop, but Joseph continues, saying the truth will appear in the end. Clark becomes uncomfortable, and Joseph points out it's because of Clark's guilt. He advises Clark that it's not too late to save himself. Meanwhile, Summer follows the sound to a house. She calls out, but when no one responds, she cautiously enters. Inside, she discovers a gramophone that's playing the preaching. She jumps when it suddenly stops, looking around the room until she notices something through the thin curtains. Finally, at their destination, Joseph goads Clark into revealing his truth. Clark ignores him to get gas, but Joseph warns him that his only salvation is to speak the truth. Annoyed, Clark turns to confront him, only to find Joseph gone. At the house, Summer nervously enters a room with a wall full of pictures of people with their faces crossed out. To her horror, she recognizes Ben's picture along with hers and Clark's. In the desert, Clark searches for Joseph when he hears a buzzing noise from the car's trunk. When he opens it, he gasps in horror as he sees a dead body body inside. Pain and sorrow fill him as he recognizes Ben's rotting corpse. Summer jumps when Joseph appears behind her. He tells her that Clark isn't who he says he is, and as a sinful man, everything he loves will be punished. Joseph also judges Summer's ignorance, describing her as good but weak and blind. He closes in, so Summer fires the gun, only to find that it's not loaded. Joseph reveals the bullets from his pocket, asking if Summer believes in God. She says yes, so Joseph tells her to find comfort that everything that'll happen is in his will. Finally, Clark realizes that Summer is in danger, so he rushes back into the town. Joseph brings a tray full of tools, and Summer runs to the door, but it's locked. He corners her, and she cries as he carves a cross on her forehead. Clark runs raggedly across the desert and arrives in town, searching for Summer. Dehydrated, he sees a water bottle and drinks, only to get a mouthful of blood. He spits it out and hears Summer calling for him. Clark rushes inside the house and hugs Summer in relief. He then turns to Joseph and throws him down the floor, brutally beating him. Witnessing the violence, Summer turns away until Clark knocks Joseph unconscious. Finally, Clark sees her traumatized state. He callously turns from her distress and notices the tools on the table. Soon, Joseph wakes up, tied to a chair. Clark demands how to escape, aiming his own gun at him, but Joseph merely spits blood on his face. Clark grabs him and insists that Joseph isn't special, mocking him. Amused, Joseph claims to be an angel sent by God to judge him. Clark demands what he should be judged for, but Joseph asks if he really wants him to reveal this. Looking at Summer, he reconsiders and plays it cool, but Joseph knows the truth, revealing that it's his curse to feel a sinner's pain. Scared, Summer pries further, so Joseph viciously warns her about Clark's duplicity. Clark prevents her from asking more, stating that he's in control. Joseph mocks that Clark isn't in control, so Clark takes shears from the tool tray and threatens to cut off Joseph's finger. Summer tries to stop him, but he yells at her. Clark demands a way out, but Joseph provokes him repeatedly until Clark cuts a finger. Summer tearfully turns away as blood spurts out, and Joseph loses consciousness. Clark looks at the injury in shock, then turns to Summer. She mourns how the situation changed her husband, but Clark continues plotting to push Joseph for more information. He insists that this is their only chance to escape, so she reluctantly agrees. Clark slaps Joseph awake, saying that torture won't end until he helps them. Joseph isn't fazed since Clark's actions are why they're here. Summer asks what he means, but Clark quiets her again and threatens Joseph. Instead of being afraid, Joseph taunts him about his lies, asking if he's told Summer about what he found in the car. Suddenly, Clark backs off, so Summer asks for answers. Deflecting the question, he pulls the gun to Joseph's head. Still, Joseph laughs, confident that Clark can't kill him and that he won't escape here. Then, seemingly defeated, he tells them he'll get him out, but he must take them to the river first. Clark takes Joseph outside, but Summer's hesitant. Joseph goads Clark about Ben, so she asks how he knows her son. Clark tries to dissuade her, but Joseph starts describing Ben and where he goes to school until Clark shuts him up. Summer is bothered about Joseph's words, but Clark dismisses them as crazy talk. At the river, they see a dust-filled land full of graves. Joseph takes them to a spot where 2 graves are open, telling them it's their final resting place. Summer is disturbed and asks where Ben is, but Clark continues to deflect and points his gun at Joseph. Still, Summer's distress finally gets to him, and he cries, revealing that Ben is dead. Distraught, Summer hits him, crying and screaming in agony. As he secretly undoes his bindings, Joseph tells him that this is the misery they cast on others 1,000-fold. She denies doing anything wrong, but Joseph reminds her everything is happening because of Clark. Summer takes the gun and rushes Joseph, but he catches her sobbing body. He prays as he cradles her, assuring her that all this is sanctioned by God. Joseph lifts her and has her aim the gun at Clark, leaving her to question him. Finally in control, Summer demands Clark to reveal his true self, but he tries to assure her that he's always been himself. She then asks him what he did and about Ben's death, enraging him. Clark drops down, exhausted yet still unwilling to reveal his true nature to her. Joseph tells Summer that the truth hurts, but lies kill. He whispers in Summer's ear to pull the trigger, knowing that Clark will never reveal his sin. She gives him one last chance, but Clark only apologizes to her. She shoots him in the head, and Summer collapses, sobbing and broken. With the deed done, Joseph prays and removes a bandage from his hand, revealing that it's healed. Summer asks him about Clark's sin, but he notes that it's not his place to reveal it. When she asks about hers, he answers that her sin is apathy. Somewhere inside her, she knew what Clark was and did nothing. Joseph returns Ben's picture, but apologizes because he can't take her with him. With that, Joseph leaves. Summer cries in the graveyard, alone and holding Ben's picture. She looks above as if seeking answers, then turns to Clark's body. Desperate, she reaches for the gun with shaky hands and points it under her chin. She shoots, but every shot doesn't give her salvation. The gun is empty, so she's left to suffer at the graveyard. Soon, Joseph hitchhikes a ride from an old lady, smiling as he's acquired another sinner to judge.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.